Welcome, everyone. Thank you for your patience. My name is Kyle Hernandez, Director of Alumni Relations and Annual Giving here at MIAD, Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design. Thank you for joining us for our How to Immerse Yourself in Your Field panel. We are in the Innovation Center with a few students, and I will turn over the program to Duane Siedensticker. Thank you all to alumni and students for joining us today.
Thank you, Kyle. Greatly appreciate all of you joining in person there in the Innovation Center, as well as virtually. Again, I'm Duane. I'm with Career Services here at MIAD. And more importantly, some wonderful professionals here in the virtual room with us. And we wanted to chat a little bit about a theme here, immersing in your profession. I know you may be used to this, but we certainly are always encouraging questions. So please, at any point through this, please put the questions in the chat, and we'll definitely get to those. And as interactive as possible, that's what we're about. And so I really do appreciate you joining us during your common hour here. So I thought if we can, for each of our four professional guests here, a brief introduction so that help our students participants know a little bit more about you. And then I had a few questions, but if you don't mind, I'm very spontaneous. As I see questions, I'm definitely going to jump to those as well. So I hope that works. And you're probably also used to this in the virtual world, just for my own organization. As you appear on the screen, I was going to go through the introductions in that order, if that's okay with you. So Paul, I had you there. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, that would be great.
Good morning. My name is Paul Vaccarello, class of 1968, Layton School of Art. And my brief bio, I'll try to keep this brief as possible. I graduated from Layton, worked briefly in Milwaukee, and then took a job in New York City for an advertising design studio where I worked there for a while. And then I took the bold step of going freelance. And there I began working with some of the movie companies of all things, and then for the advertising agencies. Then at that point, I realized that I was not making enough money to remain there. So I moved back to Milwaukee, taught for a while at the old Layton School of Art before moving to Chicago in 1974. And there I restarted my career. First, we'll be working for Playboy magazine for 6 years as a monthly illustrator and doing editorial illustrations. And then from there, I slowly merged into an advertising where I did the lion's share of my work up until 1995, when I was offered a tenure position at Columbia College. And then I was asked to chair the illustration program, which I took the offer, and I worked there until 2010, and I retired, and now I'm in sort of a semi-retirement state doing freelance work.
Oh, thank you much. I appreciate that, Paul. And then Ken, I had you next in there. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, I appreciate it.
Okay. Hi, I'm Ken Vonderberg, and like Paul, I also graduated in 1968 from the Layton School of Art. I was an industrial design major, although I did practice industrial design. My first position was actually in contract or commercial interior design for a firm that designed healthcare facilities across the US. And from that point, I then worked for several architectural firms in Milwaukee, doing primarily healthcare interiors, although a variety of other commercial interior design. And I then moved to St. Louis with my family for a position there, worked there for 4 years for one of the largest design build firms in the country, which also built healthcare facilities. And then moved back to Milwaukee, worked for several architectural firms, had my own firm, interior design firm, for a while. And then I was the interior design director for Engberg Anderson Architecture before I went into the academic field. I then started teaching interior design at Milwaukee Area Technical College, which I did for 19 years. So I was a commercial interior designer for 25 years, and then a teacher, an academic for 19. And then when I retired in 2012, I decided to go back to what I thought I was going to do in the first place, and that is be an artist. In fact, that's what my wife and I do now. I'm sitting in my home studio, and we're both artists, and that's what I really enjoy in retirement. So that's me.
Thank you much, Ken. Appreciate that. Sorry, I did have someone pop in my office there. Sorry about the disturbance there. Drew, if you could introduce yourself, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Drew Maxwell. Hopefully it's not feedbacking too bad out there. I'm the executive director of the MIAD Innovation Center. I also teach storytelling stuff here at MIAD, like comics. A little history about me. I, as a child, fell in love with visual storytelling when I picked up an issue of Fantastic Four as a kid, comic book, and I fell in love with it. And I was like, wait a minute, that's a job, I can do that. And from there, I went into developing properties, creative properties for Warner Brothers Animation and Cartoon Network, designing characters like for when they like relaunched Scooby-Doo, that kind of stuff. And then from there, started a film production company with a business partner, did that for 23 years and made over 23 feature films and visual effects for other films. And then I got a call from MIAD saying, we want you here. And I said, well, can I teach comics? And they said, sure. And so I fell in love again with that. And now I'm here running the Innovation Center. So hi, everybody.
Thank you, Drew. I know many students probably are familiar with you, which is great, but I always appreciate the introduction. And then Rachel, please, have the introduction. Thank you.
Sure. Hi everyone. I'm Rachel Hausmann-Schall. Thank you for having me today on this panel. So I am a MIAD alumni also. I graduated in 2015. I am a working artist and educator as well as a writer. Right after graduation, I was involved with some artist-run projects. I co-ran an artist collective that was around for a few years called After School Special. We founded the project, the Grilled Cheese Grant, which is still happening today. I have worked at MIAD in the registrar's office from 2017 to 2019. After that, I started working at Pius XI Catholic High School in Milwaukee as an art educator there. And now I am located in central Wisconsin. So I made the move very recently to the Wausau area where I'm working at the Lee Yawkey Woodson Art Museum as a curator of education. So in addition to all of that, I also do some writing, some arts writing for two arts publications. One of them is Art Dose Magazine, which is based in Wisconsin, and then the Chicago-based arts publication website, which is 60 Inches from Center. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Great, thank you so much. And I mean this in a sincere way. The wealth of experience is incredible. We got four people here, right? It's absolutely wonderful. Again, you'll hear me say this a few times. I'm really eager to receive any type of questions from our participants for us as a group or individuals. I'll keep encouraging that. And this might be predictable, but per the theme of our the Immerse Yourself in a Profession, I thought I'd ask, and Rachel, I'm sorry not to put you on the spot since we just talked with you, and since you're new in the profession, but for all of us, if and I know this could be quite varied, but in the sense of like, if you think currently or think back as you started in your profession per se, what steps did you do, or what did you do to help immerse yourself more in that profession? And I know that's pretty open-ended, but I know it can vary quite a bit. So if you just think a little bit early on in your profession and your era, what did you do to help immerse yourself in that profession?
Sure, and I'm answering first. Yeah.
I'm sorry if that's okay, because
yeah.
we just talked with you, and also because I know you're new.
Yeah, new. So, well, if I'm thinking back to like maybe right after college, one thing that I don't know if I was consciously aware that I was doing it, but I think it really helped me. I just participated in the Milwaukee art community in like any way that I could. So for me, I graduated with my degrees in integrated studio arts, which is now NSP. So I'm on the fine arts side of things. And for me, that meant attending gallery openings, going to artist talks, going to panels, and generally just trying to connect with people in my peer group and working artists in the city. And that was really integral to me, I think, securing all of my like full-time paying jobs, then in addition to having like a studio practice. And so similarly, I would say immersing myself then now in a relatively new field, which for me is museum work, is I guess just feeding my interest and I guess like urge to still want to learn things. And so kind of working in a variety of different institutions, still centering my practice around arts and education. I kind of think my answer would be just like jumping in and like being unafraid to go to things, to attend things. And yeah, I hope that was a good enough answer. Thanks.
Definitely. Thank you. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, Rachel. That was awesome.
It's great.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And any of you can jump in, but I thought maybe just work in reverse order if you didn't mind. Drew, do you have a little perspective on the idea of like, especially a little bit newer in the profession, how to immerse yourself?
Yeah, for sure. For me, it kind of starts with, when you're starting out and you're in college, you're figuring out who you are as a creative and what you are all about. I would say the first step for anybody is to really understand what the actual market that you're trying to enter is actually like, not what you think it's like, but go do all of that research, get to know who is successful, who wasn't, and why. And then also try to think like, where do you fit in? What makes you special? And then figure out how can you go in that direction. That to me is something that a lot of people wait to think about. And I wish students especially would start thinking about earlier. And a lot of it is research. And I know research sounds boring. You're just like, well, I want to go make art. They go together hand in hand, 100%. So I say find a way to make that research really fun.
Great, thanks. Ken, any perspective?
Well, I think that from my perspective, when I graduated, there was very little information given to students about the business side of art, about how to fit into business to get a job, because I was not in studio practice. I was a designer. I was in applied art, and that has changed considerably. From looking at it from my side of the fence as an employer, I think that the more you know about the field and doing the research, as Drew just said, the better, because you're going to need to know how to be useful to an employer in your first job. What are they going to want me to do? What do they expect me to do? And probably the best way to do that is to get an internship. And since I used to employ interns, I found that to be a great way to get people to know what they're going to need. Even if they're still in school as an intern, they can begin to realize and study what's going to make them practically useful to anybody who's going to employ them. Now, if you're a studio practice artist, you're going to have to do the research too, as Rachel said, to find out, okay, what's going to make me successful. But if you're in the applied arts, business is absolutely something that you're going to have to study and know about, because any kind of knowledge of business will be helpful. So I guess I'd say do the research, know something about the business you're getting into, and decide why you want to be in it, or better yet, if you want to be in it. Because I've seen any number of students actually get into the field and discover that this isn't what I thought it was going to be. I didn't know there'd be any math. All of that kind of thing really needs to be looked at before you get out there and look for a position.
Great, thanks, Ken. Paul, how about some of your thoughts, please?
Well, upon graduation from Layton, Milwaukee at the time was a studio-based town in terms of advertising, and we had several advertised art studios that served the agencies and the corporations in Wisconsin, and which was I really enjoyed working, but I had this notion that I really wanted to do editorial illustration, and where else to go but New York, and so I jumped in the deep end of the pool. And upon arriving in New York, the way I immersed myself was I found it was a steep hill to climb in order to get to know people. So what I did when I arrived there, I got this idea that possibly if I called on artist agents, because they seem to know the pulse of what's going on in the city, and I did. So every morning I would get up, make a pot of coffee, and then get the Manhattan Yellow Pages out where artist representative, and I started calling each one up to see if I can get it in to show my portfolio. Now, granted, I had a Layton School of Art portfolio, but I had no shame. I was curious, and I really wanted to know. And that's what I did. And from that point on, I began to understand the structure, the hierarchy of New York, especially in the advertising business, not so much in the publishing. And from there, I began to, I took the advice of the agent. They said, well, if you want to do work for NBC, call up NBC. What's the worst that could happen? They could say no. And I called them up. And a receptionist picked up the phone and said, hi, it's NBC. And I said, I'd like to speak to the art department. She switched me right over. Somebody called up and picked up the phone, and I introduced myself and what I did. He said, okay, bring your portfolio up tomorrow. I went up there, showed my work. And next thing you know, they gave me some spot illustrations to do. And so that sort of like broke the ice, and I became totally uninhibited then, calling everybody up. And then from there, I began calling the movie companies up. To their promotion department, their publicity department. From there, I started doing movie posters. I mean, comps like, here, come watch a screening at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. They give you an envelope full of stills, a synopsis, come back tomorrow morning with an idea, sized by 20 by 30 on a board. And I started doing that. And so doing these kind of jobs, doing this type of work, just driven by curiosity, that's how I immersed myself in the business initially.
Great, thanks much. I am keeping an eye in the chat room, and I know Kyle's helping as well too, in case I miss anything. So please, any comments or suggestions in there. I did have some questions, but if you didn't mind, and I kind of spontaneous this way, I did appreciate all your comments there, and you mentioned about the intern and calling up places. My career services hat, I often get the question about gaining professional experience, which is awesome, and the seeking of, quote, postings and listings of interns. While those are there, a lot of opportunities are usually gained by that direct contact. Would you, I know we just touched on that, but would any of you or all of you, would you mind sharing from your perspective both what you did, but as well now, all of you in a sense are on the receiving end as well of those type of inquiries. If you talk a little bit about that strategy of, yes, postings are efficient, but a lot of things come by that direct contact. If you have some advice to share, both by what you did and maybe what you like when you receive it, I think that might be valuable, because I think a lot of opportunities happen that way. So whoever wants to jump in, but I'd like to hear from all of you.
I'll jump in, because it's something I talk about a lot at MIAD. For me, it's, yes, there are postings, and yes, you should chase all of those things. But you're submitting in a sea of other people that are submitting. If you can actually find a way to show up and meet people, and everybody feels like, oh, there's this great barrier that I can't get through because I'm not allowed there. That's nonsense. Just like what Paul was saying, just pick up the phone. I know people don't like to call anymore, but send an email, show up at an office and bring coffee and donuts and say, hi, I'm here. I'm interested in what you do. When I come in and watch you for an hour. Honestly, most people will be like, sure, come on in. You seem really nice. Be really, and I think, Ken, I think you talked about this. When you show up, you should know what you are providing to them as well. it's a circular relationship. It's not just what do I get? Do I get a job? Because you have to provide a value to them. Otherwise, they don't need you, right? I had a student that right before COVID came to me and said, oh, I was going to get this internship. I'm not going to say which student. I'm not going to say what company. I really wanted to get this internship, but then COVID hit and they said, no, we can't do the internship. I'm super bummed. And I said, okay, so you got to know. Go turn that no into a position. And they said, well, how could I do that? I said, call them tomorrow and say, I'll show up every Friday for free. Don't pay me. I'm not asking for anything. I just want to be there and I want to show you what I can do. And if you don't like it, you kick me out. And they said, sure, yeah, that sounds great. By the end of the summer, they had a job. They were an art director on projects and had sold an idea to them for $10,000. As a senior coming into their senior year at MIAD, they already have a full-time, really nice position waiting for them at this company that said no to them. So they showed up, they rocked it, they showed what they could do, and they proved they made a position out of nothing. So no is a barrier that if you allow to be a stopping point, you'll stop there. Find a way, get to know people, show up and provide value.
I want to just piggyback on what Drew was saying. I very much agree with the like direct contact if you can get that. I think networking, while it's not my favorite word, is a huge part of like what we're talking about. And I've certainly like gotten show or exhibit opportunities by simply just showing up to other like galleries or other show openings and talking to someone. And I would say if, you know, as a student or as someone that's maybe nearing graduation, if you're kind of thinking like, well, how am I gonna get started into anything? If there's an artist that you're interested in working with, if there's a firm you're interested in working with, start asking around and see if you know someone in your immediate circle that might know someone who is, you know, good friends with that artist or knows someone that works at that firm, and see if they can connect you in an email or a phone call, like Drew's saying, or show up with coffee. You know, those like personal touches are really, really sweet, and people remember that. And I think that shows, you know, your dedication and your interest in that you are of value. And then additionally, like marketing yourself, you know, via Instagram and your website and all of that is really important. You know, you can have that obviously like linked in your email. And like the final thing, besides being artists and designers and just general creative people, I think almost all artists I've met are incredible problem solvers. So I think, Drew, your example of like turning the no into a yes is, you know, maybe propose something to this company or this artist studio you want to work with. And if you're prepared that the worst that could happen is they say no, great, because like that's going to happen. But, you know, at least you tried, and maybe there's a way you can work with them in some capacity that you didn't even anticipate. So yeah, just wanted to add that.
Oh, that's great, Rachel. I appreciate it. I really do. I don't know, Paul or Ken, any other thoughts on this week?
Well, I was going to say, this is an attitude that everyone should adopt. And I mean, if we haven't, we should, even this day and age, I'm still that way. I mean, in other words, you know, just adopting this attitude that everything is approachable in one way or another. Like Drew was mentioning, you know, if there's a no, then find a way around it to turn it into a yes. I mean, I recall a situation, and this was much later in my career. I wanted to do work for airlines, you know, working either in Chicago at the time, we had United Airlines, we had Midway Airlines, and I was making a pitch to both of the agencies to do airline work, because it was primarily newspaper, and it was black and white, and it was very lucrative, by the way. And it also was fun to draw airplanes and palm trees and things like that. Any of them, I adapted what Rachel was talking about and what Drew was talking about. I went to the agencies and asked to talk to the art director. Like who's doing your illustration for airlines, and this is why I think I'm better than what you've been doing up until now. It's kind of brash. it shows no shame, but in the world of advertising, that's what really is effective, is being very forward. So, I mean, as a result, I got the Midway account, and I was responsible for doing illustrations from the airplanes that appear in the coffee cups during in-flight service to the giant billboard you see on the expressway. So, I mean, that was a result of that thing. And I've used that attitude from the time I moved to New York up until probably most recently. I mean, I'm still doing freelance work, and if I find that there's an interesting project out there I think I could contribute, I will get on the phone and just call up and just, introduce myself and be somewhat persuasive.
Thank you. Yes, Ken, please.
Just to piggyback again on that, I mentioned that I was an industrial design major. And when I graduated, there were no positions for industrial designers in the Milwaukee area. There was a mini recession on it at the time, as a matter of fact. So I created a portfolio of commercial interior design myself and went out and talked to various firms that might hire interior designers. It turned out that I discovered there was a firm here in Milwaukee that was a national firm, did work all over the place, all over the country. And a lot of it in healthcare. Well, so I put together the portfolio to include some of that, discovered that the person who was doing the hiring, the interior design director, was a graduate of the Layton School of Art and knew some of the same people I did. And I also discovered that someone I had graduated with worked there and was leaving. So I took my portfolio, showed it to her, got hired, worked there for 6 years, and became the interior design director of the firm. So you really don't know what you can do until you decide to try it. And I didn't know I was going to be a commercial interior designer for 25 years until I got into that field and just continued doing it and discovered that I liked it. So yeah, don't take no for an answer, and be sure to understand that the skills you've learned as an art student, no matter what discipline you're in, can be applicable across a broad spectrum of disciplines. And don't be afraid to, try something else, because you probably will have to try something else during your career. You're going to not be whatever it is you graduated from. You're not going to be in that program in the future. So, try it. All they can do is say no.
Yeah, hi, Drew. Yes, thanks.
I want to add one other thing that I wish I had known earlier, and I tell people all the time. If you're not getting no's, you're not trying. You're going to get endless no's. Stephen King, when he first was writing, the most successful writer in history, he got endless no's, and he decided to put them all up in his writing space. And he said, eventually, one of those is going to be a yes. And so he used those no's as like, I'm still swinging. Eventually, I'm going to hit the ball. And that's a great thing that I wish people understood. Part of the problem is we're artists, and we love our work. We feel like it's part of who we are and what we are. So it's really easy to just take it as like devastation when you get those no's. When I was first starting out, I was like in high school, and I sent some illustrations to Marvel Comics because I thought for sure I was going to make Marvel comic covers for the X-Men. That's what I was going to do. And I got a handwritten letter back from one of the top editors at Marvel saying, hey kid, this is really good work, but this isn't quite how it works in the industry, so no. But then said, what you should go do is start in the collectible card market, drawing superheroes, Marvel characters, build up a following, build up a reputation as being somebody who can deliver stuff on time and get good, and then come back to me when you're ready. And, being young, I took it as, oh, they rejected me. That's ridiculous. They wrote a handwritten letter saying, you're good, go earn it, go learn how it all works. And I didn't have the capacity then to take that as like amazing giving advice. So that's why I really think understand how the industry works. You can't start your dream job potentially. Everybody on this panel is saying, well, I started here and then I ended up here, and all of a sudden I was the director of the thing. And that's just how it works. So understand that, like, it's a path that looks like this, and sometimes it goes back, and all of a sudden you're like, well, I didn't know I was going to do this over here. And it'd be open to that, as like, that's the point. It's the journey, not the like, did I get the thing I wanted? So
I got to chime in real quick. What Drew was talking about, yeah, because so many times when you start out in your career, somebody actually gives you a path to success, like what happened to Drew. I mean, there it was. I mean, they laid it out there step by step by step, and you achieve this, and you'll be part with us. And I had a similar situation. The Mead Paper Company had a Mead Library of Ideas, and they were located at the Pan Am building in New York. And so I found out that if you go there and take your portfolio, go see this one person, he'll evaluate it and give you some, advice on what to do with your work in New York. I did. Rejected. Terrible. Just ferocious. I mean, just tore it apart. But there's one piece in there. He says, this right here, I don't know, whatever you were thinking about, this is what you should do. I think you have a future here in this market. But I was devastated. I was so overwhelmed by the rejection in the beginning that I didn't exactly hear that until one day. I thought, this guy was telling me where to take it. And I began to do it. And the rest of the experiences I mentioned earlier began to take place. And most I had to do, not so much with technique, but I had to do with the attitude of how you approach the artwork. And so sometimes it's so important to have that experience, what we think is negative, to turn that into a positive. And I recommend anybody listening to us right now, just remember this. I mean, this could be one of those defining moments of how much closer do you get to your goal, whatever that goal is. So I'll now relinquish my time here because I can get passionate about this.
I have one final thing maybe to add on this. If I'm sort of unfamiliar with, like, what impact COVID has maybe had on, just availability of like internships or professional opportunities, especially for students. But I would say that if COVID has had like impact on the availability of like stuff to be doing, my recommendation would also be like, find a way to create your own opportunity and like work with other students, classes, your professors to, on the fine art side, like, can you put together a show at a space and approach that space and say like, hey, we have, our sculpture class like wants to have an exhibit. Would you consider showing our work? Like, excellent, and I think I've seen some really, really wonderful like student organized exhibitions, and that's just one example. But if, like a zine, you can make a zine very easily. What skills and abilities do you have right now at your disposal that you can make your own opportunities for yourself if they're not out there for you? So that's another like solution.
Rachel, I want to jump on what you're saying. You're talking about COVID. And no, I see COVID as an opportunity for, for artists, because we're talking about today. There's such a demand right now. There's a demand for people who want to work. And I think there's demand for people who show enthusiasm to work. And I think there's a huge opportunity at this point for people coming out of school to fill these positions, because there seems to be some reluctance in the workplace for what reason, I have no idea, but there are openings. And I think one of the things you have to look at is that don't let COVID be a deterrent, but let it be an opportunity. Because I think there's a lot out there to be had. The other day I was looking up the average salaries of this graphic designers and illustrators, and I was amazed to see there was a sharp increase from where it was just a few short years ago. And I was thinking, well, probably it's because there's a demand now for talent out there. So I mean, word out there to the students who are listening to us today is that this is an opportunity and take advantage of it. As in a stock market world, you're buying, this is your dip, take advantage of it, get in on this, what's going on.
Thanks. I appreciate that. The advice is great, and I'd like to know that I try to mirror that when I'm working students. So I really appreciate it. All of you are helping me too. One of our participants did happen to ask. We touched on this, but if any of you could elaborate. One of our participants graduated during COVID, and so opportunities were limited, and because having a little bit of lack of experience now, this graduate was wondering what advice would you give for someone to try to reach out, at least ask an employer to give them their first shot. And looking, you touch on it, but can you add a little bit more and that maybe advice and encouraging this recent graduate of how to prospect with an employer and allowing them to give them their first shot. This graduate happens to be a product design and industrial design grad, but any of your advice would be great. Yes, Ken.
Have you joined the Industrial Designers Society of America? I think that's the first thing I would ask. I was an IDSA member at the beginning of my career, and going to meetings for the IDSA is a way to meet other people in the field. Now, maybe you're already a student member, I'm not sure, but okay, well, that's good. I see you were the former president of the student chapter. Okay, I found personally that connecting with people through professional organizations, in my case, the American Society of Interior Designers or the other organizations that interior designers would join, is the best way to meet people outside of a business situation where they're not as defensive about, no, I don't want to look at your portfolio, kid, I'm too busy. But at least they might talk to you at a meeting and you get to hear things. You know, you get to hear who's hiring, who may be leaving someplace. And I found that to be very helpful. I was also involved in those organizations myself as the chair of various committees. And you do get to know other people in the field and get to hear things you probably wouldn't otherwise. So I guess if that isn't of too much help, Olivia, maybe at least you have a connection to other people in the field that would be helpful.
I'm going to jump in.
Yeah, thank you, Drew. Go ahead. Sorry.
No problem. Hi, Olivia. Olivia is one of my favorite students ever from MIAD. So, and we're working together right now on a project. So, one of the things that I wish I thought of much earlier in my career is that, like, okay, so I'll use comics as an example because I always do because I love comics so much. Yes, there's this mainstream dream company that you want to work for. Let's say it's Marvel Comics. Okay. Oh, yeah, that's it. It's either that or nothing. I think you get there, but you get there by kind of starting with a smaller company or a secondary thing that is related to that thing you want to do. So maybe it's an advertising comic to sell something, or maybe it's a comic that comes in the back of like a toy. You know, and it's like you're still doing the same thing you learned to do that you went to school for. So there are all these like sideline companies and things that go along with that industry, and they are great opportunities because you can come in there as like an art director right away. Like, and then what you have when you go back to those bigger opportunities or those bigger fish that you want to catch, they look at your resume and say, oh, you did that for 6 years for somebody else. Okay, you know what that tells them is like, you know how to meet deadlines, you know how to get through stress, you know how to, navigate the business side of it. A lot of companies don't want to take risks until somebody has done that because they don't have time or money to train you how to do those things. So they want you to go practice all that with somebody else, and then you're ready for the big fish, I guess. And that I don't see that as like a failure to like, oh, I didn't go to that big company. Often you won't get the opportunity there until you've done it elsewhere for somebody else. And you get great experience doing it with somebody else because you're more supported usually at a smaller opportunity to start out.
This is great. Thank you so much. And just reminding participants, please ask any questions in the chat. Please, I really encourage that. And it is helpful because not that our wonderful professionals didn't believe me, but I know we have participants here and your questions help show that. So I really appreciate that. Yes, Ken, I'm sorry, you were going to say something.
Well, I getting back to what Olivia was saying about being an industrial design major, well, so was I. And, again, I couldn't find a position in industrial design, so I became a commercial interior designer. Those skills are transferable too. Product design and commercial interior design, for instance, not so much residential interior design, but commercial interior design and product design or industrial design are very closely related. They're allied disciplines. And you might consider product design for products that would be used by the interior design profession or by the architectural products profession, something like that, and sort of worm your way in sideways, kind of like I did. Maybe that's possible, maybe it isn't, but there may be some merits to looking at the allied industries.
I was thinking about product design. Another way of getting experience is working with filmmakers. Sometimes having to design, okay, probably the greatest product designer, industrial designer ever was in the movie business was Sid Mead. And I see Drew up there, yeah. So yeah, and this is an opportunity for product designers and interior art designers to get into getting a body of work is worked with filmmakers, because here's it gives you opportunity. You don't really have to actually develop the product for production. You just develop prototypes and which are seen on film. One of the things that we did at Columbia was that we had a film department, so a lot of the art and design students would work with the filmmakers. This would be a way of them gaining experience in a practical way, producing items or producing either artwork or actually interiors or storyboards, whatever for film, and that gave them a body of work that they then could take to the area that they wanted to work in. And this what Drew was mentioning is that, okay, now you've demonstrated that you can deal with this. So now we can take a chance on you, because the reliability is in a large corporation is probably worth as much as the quality of your portfolio. So that'd be another way of for people out there to consider too. Now down here in Chicago, we do have a lot of filmmakers down here. I at this time I couldn't get it out. But there are a lot of film production going on here, and if there's a way of accessing who's doing what, that would be an excellent way of contacting them. They're very receptive, and set up a meeting to show your things, and that would be a way of getting into getting a body of work. So that's about it. Okay.
Still keeping an eye on the chat here. A couple more questions before we left would be awesome. I don't mean to keep pushing that, but that would be great if there's a few more questions from our participants. And I don't necessarily need to repeat, but I do like some of the discussion on making these contacts and reaching out. I know this may seem a little bit basic or fundamental, but what resources, if you're starting to want to research and find places, I mean, I know there's the infamous Google World Search, and Google Analytics are incredible, but when you talk about maybe professional directories, professional organizations, associations, and other types of resources, if you're in the early stage of trying to find places, do any of you have thoughts or recommendations?
Yeah, you go ahead. Oh,
go ahead.
Okay. On the fine art, but also, I think just art and gallery kind of resource in general. For Milwaukee, there's, Marn is a great resource. They've just opened a new space very close to MIAD and kind of redesigned their whole everything. There's a really great directory on there, a pretty affordable membership. That's, I think, a really good one. There are a couple of national websites that I know I frequently visit for show opportunities or jobs, and actually just as a resource in general for application materials. If you just want to reference how to put together an artist CV, it's really helpful. The College Art Association, which I think is just called, the website is collegeart.org. That's a really great resource with tons of info. I know I frequently like visit that for various reasons. I guess those are the two I thought of off the top of my head.
Well, that's great. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and the professional organizations that I would recommend are the American Society of Interior Designers. And if you go to asid.org, there's a lot of information for students that would be very helpful in making connections. There is a student organization. This is for people who might be in the interior architecture program or product design. There's the International Interior Design Association, so that's iida.org. There is another organization I used to belong to called IFMA, IFMA, which is the International Facilities Management Association, and they would be at ifma.org. This is an organization for people who run large facilities such as Northwestern Mutual or BMO Harris. They run the physical plant, the physical facilities, and also design them and space plan them. And I was a professional member of that organization as well. So interior designers may not necessarily, or interior architecture majors may not necessarily be doing interior design. They may be doing space planning for organizations like Northwestern Mutual or some of the big banks, for instance. So there are, sort of alternatives, but ASID, IFMA, IIDA, going to those professional organizations and seeing what resources are available on their website for students or graduates, I think might be a good idea.
I have one other organization, if I could just jump in real quick. In Chicago, we have the Society of Typographic Artists. This is specifically for designers, but I think in recent years they have opened it up and allowed illustrators and other visual artists into the organization to maintain membership. But this is a great organization to network, to find out what's going on in the greater Chicago market, which now I guess reaches all the way up to southern Wisconsin. So I would recommend this would be a good resource to look into.
Paul, I'm sorry, what was the name of that again, please?
STA, it's Society of Typographic Artists Chicago. Now it's important to spell it out as Society of Typographic Artists, because there's also an investment group here too that's on LaSalle Street, and this one I think is up in the near north side, if not in the river north area they're located. But this would be one, and if anybody has any questions, please contact me and I can give you more information about them.
Great, thank you. Yes, Ken.
There's one other one for people who would be more in the graphic design area, would be AIGA, the American Institute of Graphic Artists, which my wife used to belong to because she was one of those before she retired. So AIGA is another possibility for those who are doing graphic design.
Great, thank you. Appreciate that. We did have an in-person question. It's great to hear after all these COVID months, which I love, an in-person question in the Innovation Center. Individuals asking, is there a certain level of experience you need in order to establish yourself? And I'm trying to interpret, I don't know if that necessarily means establishing at a business or establishing yourself as a self-employed, but Drew, you have your hand up, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's a great question. What I would say to that is you have to determine what establishing yourself means to you personally. For some people, it's making excellent work and being recognized. For others, it's I can support myself doing this, and I don't really care if it's recognized. Figure out what that means to you and then go towards that. For a lot of people, it means, oh, this is my career now, and I can do this probably as long as I want. But experience is paramount to being established, in my opinion. What people are really looking for is somebody who's done something before and made a bunch of mistakes and survived it and got better and can do that again and again and again. And so what I always say to people, if you want to establish yourself or at least know your path forward, figure out what this is weird way to put it, but figure out what your unique value proposition is as a creative. What does that mean? I'll say it again, unique value proposition. How do you break in and compete with a sea of other creatives? And if your portfolio looks like everybody else's portfolio, that's going to be tough to compete. What are you really, 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 really great at? For some people, it's like, I'm a great leader and I'm pretty good at rendering. Okay, that's what you should chase. Be a leader, be an art director, be a manager, start a company. If you're really, really great at rendering, then find a company that's like, I'll tell you what to do, but I need great renderers. And then if you try to just be like, oh, I'm great at everything, you're not. Nobody is. So figure out what that is for you to be able to compete. An example that I use to kind of spell this idea out is if I told you, hey, I'm going to make a brownie pan, I'm going to take it to market. What do you think? Most people say, don't do that. You can buy them anywhere for $2. But if I said, well, my brownie pan has these edges in it, so it creates a brownie that's all the crispy parts of a brownie. Well, that's a unique brownie pan. You can take that to market all day and probably charge $30 for it. That's a unique value proposition. So as a creative, figure out what yours is. And if you don't know, spend some time thinking about it and then establish yourself in that direction.
And I really appreciate all this. I take notes all the time from all these wonderful professionals, which I appreciate. In all seriousness, one of our participants wanted to reflect and attest to the paths that we take. And the individual mentioned that happened to graduate with illustration, then worked for quite a while within print production, a large printer, and then that segued into some of the graphic design industries. So a reflection of what some of you are mentioning there. So I do appreciate all this. I've been keeping an eye on the questions, so I appreciate those that have been coming in. And I'm also looking at our time here as well, because I wanted to be appreciative of that, because 12:15 is what we overall mentioned. I know this might seem kind of common, and I'd like moving into departing thoughts, but if any of you thinking of a lot, we have some alumni and definitely several students right in the Innovation Center. But is there anything you would like to help impart, with the individuals as they're already doing really well, but as they make these next steps to embark on their profession? Maybe position yourself again. I know some of you touched on this. Think of yourself similar, when you were at that point, and what were you thinking that could have maybe helped propel you all the more into your ambition, into what you wanted to do?
You were talking about parting words right now? Party.
Yeah, kind of that, and the theme of, as parting words as we jump into they're already in their profession, but all the more as they move into that idea of immersing more into the profession, how to really help engage that all the more.
I can't help. When I first got out of Layton, when I moved to New York and I started talking to the artist agents there, this is right in the middle of the Madman era. And I remember the advice they gave me. There were quips. This was from several of them. They were senior agents. One said, be aggressive, but don't be desperate. Have an insatiable sense of curiosity. And during an interview, tell people what they want to hear, not what they want to know. That was sort of a framework of how to sort of collect your thoughts as you move forward. And it's always stayed with me throughout my career.
I like that. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it. Ken, yes.
I would say, don't be afraid to interview for information too. If you just approach somebody in your field, the field that you want to get into, and ask them to just come in, talk with them for a while about what they do and what they're looking for, without expectations of getting a job, but rather just to find out what's going on in the field and what are they hiring, who are they hiring, what do they want? And then politely, following that up with an email saying thank you. By the way, that helps a lot, because I interviewed plenty of designers who never followed up the stupid interview or sending me a resume. And that immediately went into the trash basket. People need to follow up. Be businesslike if you're going to be in a business, because guess what? 80% of whatever you do, including fine art, is a business, and there's no way around it. I've discovered that both as a fine artist and as a designer. There's no avoiding it. You have to know the business side of this, or you're going to sink. So you better find out about it, and just go out there and see if you can't talk to some people purely to interview them, to see what's what.
Great, thanks, Ken.
I think I would share, don't, as much as you can, don't be afraid of rejection, because it happens to everyone. And if they tell you otherwise, they're lying. So don't be afraid of rejection, and don't be afraid to ask for help or resources. One really important thing that I don't even think I fully learned until probably a couple of years ago, have someone else read over your resume and your cover letter and your application materials for anything that you're applying to. It really helps to have another set of eyes, on your materials, even your portfolio, what order you're submitting images in. All of that stuff matters. And sometimes you overlook some of your own best skills. So to have a colleague or a professor or a friend look at that and let you know what you're missing, or just what could make it stronger, is really, really helpful.
That's a good point.
Thanks, Rachel. Go ahead. Thanks.
For me, one thing I wish I knew earlier, especially starting out, is no one really is going to give anybody permission to do something. You kind of have to create an opportunity. You kick the door in, you sit at the table and say, I'm here, let's do some amazing stuff. That's half of it. The other half is, this is cheesy, but cheese is delicious. Fortune favors the bold. Be bold. Just say, I'm going to go do this thing, and then don't quit until you've done it. And yeah, you're going to fall down, you're going to scrape your knees, it's going to hurt, and there's going to be a million things telling you to quit. Just don't. Because what actually makes people hire you is that you can get something through the valley of darkness to the other side where it's alive. That's what people are hiring in every field, not just art and design. So don't quit until you do it. Fortune favors the bold.
That's great. I appreciate it. And I as a quick aside, I had to throw in, I'm dating myself a little bit, but I received all those rejection letters as well. And I was bummed at first. And then I actually started organizing the rejection letters as the ones that I thought were most creative and the best well-written rejection letters. And I started following up with those businesses, letting them know that I really appreciated how they approached the rejection.
That was great idea. Love it.
So I'm sorry, we're nearing the time there, but Ken, you had your hand up?
Oh, I just wanted to reiterate that as to rejection, something to understand is that when you're in the field, there will be plenty of rejection too. That, you may present your brains out to some client and you think you've got the world's best design, and they will say, yeah, what else have you got? Are you going to show me something else? And I had a particular client that I would prepare several presentations for, knowing he was going to reject 2 or 3 of them. And I had a backup that I thought he would probably accept, and he usually did. So rejection does not end when you get the job. You will get plenty of rejection from the people you're not just working for, but the people who they're working for. And you better be prepared for it, because it's just part of being a designer or an artist.
I appreciate that point. And I know Juno, Zipula, Kyle, and Rachel, then sincerely, I really appreciated this as well. Your insight. As long as I'm at this, I always love learning from professionals in the field. And Kyle, we're at our time, correct?
Yep. Yes, I hear students going to class. So yes.
Yep. That's what I thought. So again, much appreciated taking your time. I really do appreciate this. I hope you enjoyed this as well. Thank you so much for participating and hopefully involved. So thank you so much. Kyle, are we good to go? So all right. Thanks
For having me. Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your week. Have a wonderful weekend.